Hello and welcome to another session of Karen's Colours. I'm Dr. Karen and these are my colour conversations. This session we'll be looking at the colour grey. Now grey is an interesting one, and as you'll find out, it's probably not quite as negative as most people seem to think. But before we get started, I'd like to welcome once again those of you who've been following this series of videos, and any new visitors to this site, you are doubly welcome. Again, thank you for those of you who've subscribed. Remember, if you haven't subscribed yet but you are watching, it's only a click away and it's free. Okay then, let's get started. I've entitled this session, Grey, Elegance or Dross. It has been seen to be both for this particular colour. So what indeed are we going to be examining today? Firstly, we'll have a look at the features of the colour grey. Then we'll look at the history of the colour. You'll notice there are two spellings for grey. G-R-E-Y is the original UK spelling, and it's the one that we use here in Australia. G-R-A-Y means exactly the same thing, and it is the spelling used in the US. What's the difference? I don't know, and I haven't been able to find out. What's more, the pronunciation is identical. Then we'll look at grey as a basic colour term, followed by its cultural uses, and then we'll examine the effects of grey, both positive and negative, but in this instance also the neutral effects of grey on the human being. Perhaps the most notable aspect of the colour grey is that it sits in the middle of the opposition between black and white, and as such it has some of the features of both. If you add a little bit of black to white, you almost instantly get into grey. If you add a little bit of white into black, you also almost instantly get into the grey zone. It is achromatic. Well, what does that mean? There is no actual colour associated with grey, but nevertheless, greys can be quite neutral. They don't clash with anything. They also go with most other colours, unlike black or white, where only certain colours are ideally suited to accompany those particular colours. There are both warm and cool aspects of grey. The warm undertones are generally reddish, brown, or yellow, and they create a cosy, inviting feel. The cool greys, on the other hand, have either blue or green undertones, and they're more crisp and modern, as far as we, in the 21st century, would regard them. Grey can moderate quite a number of other hues, and it does so by brightening some colours and deepening other colours. And you can see here quite a variety of greys, all of them linked to other colours. Some of them are quite pleasant palettes, others perhaps not so. Grey can pull a colour scheme together and so turns a basic grey room into one that is bright and airier or comforting and deeper in colour. And this allows the person who is living in those rooms to show their personality without necessarily having to repaint the entire place. It's the standard colour for cities. Here, the city of Chicago in early morning light, even with the pink of the light that's coming up at dawn, we can still see how grey the colour of the city is. It also happens to be the least favourite colour in global research. There are over 500 different shades of grey that the human eye can discern. Nonetheless, we tend to divide these into three basic categories. Light grey, which is calming. It symbolises neutrality, unpretentiousness and coolness. It feels airy, clean and fairly optimistic, and it's associated with new beginnings and fresh starts. Medium grey represents expensiveness, intelligence, high technology, and creativity. Dark grey represents the masculine nature of grey, and it means formality, it means inflexibility, and also suppression of ideas and activities. It can evoke feelings of sophistication, mystery, or even melancholia. Throughout history, artists have used both charcoal and lead to create subtle gradations in their work. This piece of work, unfortunately, is a modern one. I've had great difficulty in finding images of ancient pictures done in charcoal or lead. But the practice tends to continue today. This is a charcoal drawing, and here we have one that is done in lead. Of course, these days we use lead pencils rather than pieces of lead, so they're less likely to have those little particles of lead seep through our skin into our bodies, and also stops people from licking them and therefore developing lead poisoning. In fact, we use graphite rather than lead as such. We still call them lead pencils, though they generally don't contain pure lead. In ancient China, for example, grey houses were considered to be de rigueur. The samurai wore grey outfits as their uniform of choice. And also we find today that grey describes something that's dark, old, or tarnished. And so the clay warriors found in China that were buried many centuries ago are all associated with the colour grey, which of course is the colour that they probably would have been when they were buried. In ancient Egypt, the ibis was considered to be a sacred bird. This one is the Benu heron, which is now extinct, but it was the basis for the idea of one of the gods, the heron-headed one, and as such, its link from the grey colour to godhead was one that was well established. And so grey then was also used as a sacred colour for other gods. As a colour, it was therefore well respected. In the Middle Ages, undyed woolen garments were naturally grey or brownish grey. They were considered to be the clothing of the peasants and the poor. But Catholic monks, in their portrayal of themselves as sympathetic to poverty and also humility, also tended to adopt the colour grey in their clothing. During the Renaissance period, grey was important in both art and fashion because it contrasted well with the colours of the human skin. It was the popularity of the colour black among European upper classes that made grey and white gradually come into prominence. By the 18th century, grey became the fashionable colour of the wealthy and nobility. It coloured men's waistcoats and breeches, and women's satin dresses also tended to be grey. In the mid-19th century, grey became the colour of business, of people who were industrious, so the business suit slowly became popularised. Dresses also tended to be grey if the person was a person working in some sort of fashionable industry, such as shopkeeping. It was also considered to be a very fashionable colour and very commonly used among the military. And this was primarily because now that we had rifles to shoot at one another, a grey garment made it less likely that you were easily seen as a target. So soldiers became less visible. It was symbolic of war and industrialization by the early 20th century, and by the late 20th century it had once again reverted to being a colour of sophistication and a signifier of wealth. Grey also had some spiritual uses. In the Bible, grey is mentioned as acquiring wisdom through aging. It was associated with dignity, honour, repentance, humility and modesty. And it was also worn by friars and nuns of different orders once religion had become established as something that was an institution. In modern times, crystal healing has taken over from the spiritual uses of grey, and grey gemstones as quite common, all of which are used to be calming and soothing on the psyche. They're expected to be preventative of negative and evil energies, and they are often worn as pieces of jewellery, some of them very plain pieces, others quite ornate. Let's now turn to grey as a basic colour term. The word grey came from the Proto-Germanic grua, which evolved into the Old English grey, which then was considered to be a colour between black and white with little or no hue or luminosity. In other words, it was a dull colour. The first recorded use of grey as a basic colour term in English was in 700 CE. It was developed from the Middle English grey or grey, and it related to the Dutch grauw or the German grau. It has no opposite colour. Unlike black and white, which are opposites, red and green, blue and orange, purple and yellow, grey sits in the middle of that black and white continuum and does not sit in the middle of any of the other hues, which makes it unique as a colour. Culturally, in China, grey was considered to be humility. It embodied a modest, unassuming nature. It had reserved elegance and symbolized controlled action. In Africa, grey was considered to be a very stalwart, a sturdy, strong colour, one that allowed for the establishment of permanent homes, even though those homes appear to be more likely to be blown down easily than our more permanent Western structures. Nevertheless, the idea of a grey hut was instilled in people as some place of permanence, constancy, stability, and security. It also was used extensively in their art forms, as well as to indicate someone who is mature and authoritative. In Western culture, grey is mostly associated with gloomy weather and glum emotions. Nevertheless, it has a modest professionalism, which is not flashy, exciting, or even trendy. It is the colour of diplomacy, where people meet in the middle of specific conflicting ideas. But it can also be associated with a great deal of sophistication. In the West, grey is most common in urban environments, and indeed most of the luxurious buildings around have a great deal of grey in their outer and inner structures. It's used as a background in most photography because of its neutrality and the easiness it has on the eye. It also makes for a very good contrast to the subject who is being photographed. It's used for technology and particularly for high-end products. It elevates the perceived value of an item, so a flashy grey car looks far more expensive than, say, a flashy green car or yellow car or even a red car. Grey is used by many companies as the colour of their logos, and that tends to increase the value of that particular company simply through the use of grey. Now here is just simply 8 of them, but there are many more, and I'm sure you could add to the list yourself. Grey has some physical effects on humans as well. Only 3% of the world's population has grey eyes, and as such they're considered highly unusual, and the wearer is considered to have certain properties. Grey tends to have less pronounced physical effects than other hues, but it also tends to bring down the energy level. So therefore, it allows for solemnity in courtrooms, solitude in prisons. It also promotes restful sleep and induces contemplation. Grey's psychological effects are often associated with its combinations with other colours, and those produce a wide range of effects. If we add it to white, we get a clean, modern look. With yellow, we have a vibrant, contemporary vibe. With pink, it offers a softer, more romantic atmosphere. With bold colours, we have a more dynamic feel to the room. And with stainless steel, such as in kitchen appliances, it can evoke a sleek and modern vibe in that room. But its impact on spatial perception is also important. Light greys make a place feel larger, formal, clinical, and also more open. Darker greys tend to evoke a more cosy, intimate atmosphere. And it's particularly useful for small spaces or rooms with a challenging layout, but it also allows for enhanced focus and concentration, which is an excellent choice, of course, for places where you are needing to study or use as a workplace. Now, grey has a number of different image issues. The positive perceptions are that it allows for security and liberalism. It's calming, stabilizing, tranquil, and it offers respite. It's refined, dignified, understated, elegant, conservative, and authoritative. The grey also advocates the idea of wisdom. And here we have grey hair as a sign of a wizened elder, someone to be respected, someone who has a lot of hard-earned knowledge that can be trusted as being factual. And there's also an air of maturity and refinement that comes with the colour grey. The perception of negativity with grey is indifference, emotional distance, or disconnectedness, sadness, coldness, decay, morally questionable activities, someone who is indecisive, or someone who lacks understanding. It's also associated with senility, and this is very much disparaged because someone who is old and forgetful is often disregarded as having anything of value to contribute. There is an idea of dullness or being stuck in the past associated with this. As well as that, we have grey as a colour of control. There is an enforced conformity, a boredom or lack of stimulation that comes with the colour grey. And finally, grey is also the most dominant colour in cemeteries, and as such, it represents death. Objectivity is an aspect of the colour grey. It associates itself with impartiality and even-handedness, such as the scales of justice. It's the ultimate negotiator, and it offers ambiguity as well as compromise. Grey is also associated with solemnity and seriousness. When discussing important matters, grey tends to grab a bit of attention. It also shows credibility and competence. It's a colour of conservatism, one in which there are associations of being drawn back into the past, and they can be either good or bad. The more conservative a person is, the more strings they have attached to them that link them with past issues rather than their ability to move forward. It also allows for versatility. The polymath is the person who is able to do many different things. It's more than just multitasking. This is the ability to excel in different fields of expertise. The person adapts to various contexts and purposes. And then finally, grey is also associated with mystery. At the moment, there is a huge mystery happening in Colorado, where there are drones coming out nightly who are hovering high in the air over townships and other areas where people are wondering just what it is that's happening. Could it be that these drones simply come out at night so they can obscure our vision? They're full of mystery and uncertainty, but as some conspiracy theorists also describe, they could be due to aliens. Grey has entered our language in various idioms as well. There aren't as many grey idioms as we have for some other colours, but that's all right. Seeing things in shades of grey means to have an open mind. This is part of a colour vision test. If you can see anything in there, then your colour vision is different to mine. All cats are grey in the dark. This means basically at night, in the darkness, appearances don't really matter. Grey matter refers to the outer cortex of the brain. This is where we do most of our thinking, most of our resolving of issues that we're faced with on a daily basis. When we get grey hair from something, it's usually being exceedingly worried, depressed, stressed, or upset by or about something or someone. The grey market refers to selling things under the counter. It's not associated with legal pathways of sales. It's not associated with illegal pathways of sales. It is being able to get something cheaper than its normal price and yet be able to purchase it regardless of the regulations that might pertain to that particular item. A grey mood is living under a grey cloud. It's unhappiness, which is either anxious, strained, worried, or just plain sad. And then finally we have the grey area. This is where a person's mental capacities can be caught between two differing or even multiple differing viewpoints. In that there are difficult discussions, the topic is ill-defined, there are nuances that exist, and it can be open to interpretation of various kinds. Which brings us to what have we learnt about the colour grey? Well, grey is the most versatile of all the colours. Its emergence as a basic colour term dates from antiquity, and it's played a significant role throughout history, both positive and negative. It moves in and out of popularity depending on the shade and other associated colours, and also the meanings that are currently attributed to that particular shade or combination. It links to extremes of experience, emotions, and reactions. Grey generally offers a middle way for all things. And that's it for the colour grey. I hope you've enjoyed this little foray into what would otherwise have been considered to be a fairly dull topic. I hope you'll join me next time for another session of Karen's Colours. In the meantime, may your life be filled with sophisticated grey rather than dullness. May you have a great life. We're coming into the Christmas season, and certainly I hope that you have a safe and happy one. Catch you next time. Bye.